As we know, AFL football is one of the most unique sports on the planet. The rules, the physical skill set required, and of course the pace of the game. However, its league system is just like many sporting leagues across the globe, such as the NFL and NBA, containing one league, one organisation, no promotion and relegation, and the top teams compete in a playoffs/finals bracket to become the overall competition's champion. Now, what if the AFL were to implement a promotion and relegation system into Australian rules football? Former Hawthorn president Jeff Kennett and Gary Lyon and SCN have spoken and posed about the thought before. The promotion and relegation system is also known as a football pyramid, and these are displayed in European domestic soccer leagues. Football pyramids are a series of interconnected leagues that has a hierarchical format, with of course promotion and relegation between leagues at different levels. This theoretically means one of the smallest clubs from a low tier could climb up all the way to the highest tier. So in this video today, we are going to take a look and explore how this system would be implemented in Aussie rules footy, going over how the teams and tiers would be structured. Now, before we get into it, the AFL would require a massive and near impossible overhaul to structure into a football pyramid system. The gap in the economies, infrastructure, and the playing standard between the AFL and the lower leagues is a substantial difference. These are no doubt circumstances that European and domestic leagues of course face. However, considering that the AFL is only played professionally in one country, the lack of players, talents and athletes also strike as an issue to potentially create a competitive enough system. Perhaps one of the first steps would lead into more overseas recruitment and development. Though expensive, it would benefit the game of Aussie rules in other countries, while supplying the sport with more numbers and competition. This leads into the next point of list sizes. To help out with the numbers, list sizes from the AFL clubs to all of the competing clubs in the system would need to be reduced, therefore meaning an individual's position on an AFL list would be harder to retain. This would give the availability of lower league clubs to poach and pick up delisted players. One of the next main steps is to form an association that would become the governing body of Australian rules football across all levels of the country. Currently, the AFL Commission controls the AFL competition, the talent pathway programs such as the draft, and many more associated with the sport. The Commission would need to expand its control to all levels and competitions to have the ability to form a football tier system. However, it isn't quite simple as doing what has been explained so far. One big problem still stands in the way of this whole project coming to fruition: money. The lack of worldwide popularity in the sport translates into a lack of funds to transition AFL into a multi-tier system, therefore meaning, as stated earlier, the overhaul is near impossible. Money would need to be funded into areas such as player development, growing of the game domestically and internationally, infrastructure, soft cap, forming of the leagues, broadcast deals, fan bases, and many more. However, this video is containing the fantasies and what ifs on how a tier system would be structured. There is of course many issues that stand in the way, but let's just pretend that multiple tycoons and moguls invested a large sum for this whole plan to come to fruition. To kick things off, the pyramid system will contain 4 tiers of football. Because of the lack of clubs, players and overseas popularity, this is why there is only 4 levels compared to the likes of English soccer, who have multiple levels and tiers. Let's go over the 4 tiers, starting with tier 1, the AFL. Pretty straightforward, the top tier is the league we are familiar with of the AFL. The ladder system would be the exact same, 18 teams, top 8 would go through to finals, top 4 get a double chance. The added element of relegation, however, would mean that the team that finishes in 18th place would be relegated into tier 2. Moving down to tier 2, the second division of the Aussie rules system. Tier 2 consists of a new league called the National Australian Football League, or known as the NAFL. Comment down below if you have a more creative name for it. The league consists of 24 clubs from the top sides across the current Australian leagues, such as the VFL, Queensland AFL, SANFL, WAFL, New South Wales/ACT AFL, Northern Territory, and Tasmania AFL. Because of the quality of sides from the VFL, Sample and WAFL, the league would most likely consist of these teams from these leagues, with maybe a club or two from Sydney or Tasmania. The creation of this tier could also aid the establishment of the Tasmania Devils, as well as a Canberra and Northern Territory side. Because of their states displaying much lower football quality than the other states, these sides would be created to become a more competitive brand and force in the system. The ladder structure is similar to the AFL. The top 8 makes finals with the exact same final system. The premiership winner gets promoted into the AFL in Tier 1. Out of the 24 teams, the side that finishes last place and 24th will be relegated into Tier 3. Moving down the pyramid now to Tier 3. Tier 3 does not contain a single league like the tiers above. It contains 8 separate state leagues, 1 league for each state or territory. The number of teams in each state league won't be specified in this video, as the number depends for each state and territory. The 8 premiership winners from each state and territory's respective league will go into a promotion knockout bracket, with a random draw to determine the bracket and who plays who. The winner out of the whole promotion bracket will be promoted into the NAFL in Tier 2. The team that was relegated from the NAFL in Tier 2 will return to their respective state league in Tier 3. Finally, the last place sides from each of the 8 state and territory leagues are relegated to Tier 4. Moving on now to the final tier, Tier 4. The lowest tier in the footy pyramid contains all of the regional leagues across the country. Again, all the leagues won't be specified as there are far too many to go over and it is impractical to name them all in this video. Some examples being the Victorian Country Leagues, the AFL Sydney League, AFL Cairns, etc. The premiership winners from every regional league in Australia are then placed into their respective states' championship promotion series. The number of teams competing in each state series varies. Obviously, Victoria would have a lot more teams competing than the Northern Territory series. Depending on the numbers of each state series, a finals knockout is created for every state. The winners from each state's championship bracket are then promoted to Tier 3 and placed in their respective Tier 3 state league. The bottom finishers from Tier 3 are relegated and placed back into their respective regional leagues in Tier 4. Now a question might remain for a few people. What about all the clubs' reserve sides? Where would they place and how would they play their games? It wouldn't make much sense if they would play in the same competition as their counterparts. You are 100% correct, which leads me into my next tiers. To complete the pyramid, we have our reserves competitions. These reserve tiers do not intertwine with the main tiers, but they do have the same final series structures, however with one big exclusion. As the main aspect with reserve sides is play development, well, mostly to the higher tier sides, promotion and relegation based off reserve sides' performances are not implemented in the reserve system. Instead, teams are relegated or promoted based off their main side's performance. Let's say a team from the NAFL in Tier 2, such as the Woodville West Torrens, were promoted into the AFL in Tier 1. Their reserve side would also be promoted into the AFL Reserves Tier 1 competition, and vice versa. This system is implemented so that there is more symmetry with the pyramid, reserve sides are playing who they should, and so there isn't a reserve side, let's say, playing 2 tiers lower than their main side, and vice versa. So there you have it. There is the Australian rules football pyramid system explained. For a handful of people, it might have been difficult to understand the whole thing, which is totally fine. So to add some fluidity to the video and explain the scenarios more, we will use an example of a Tier 4 team going all the way up to Tier 1. Let's choose the East Ringwood Football Club for example, as, I don't know, I was born there I guess. They currently compete in the Premier Division of the Eastern Football League. If they win the flag of the Eastern Football League, they represent their league and go to the Victorian State Championship Series. For hypotheticals and to help out the example, let's say there are 16 regional leagues in Victoria. Ringwood competes in the knockout bracket with 15 other premiership winning clubs from their leagues. The bracket is randomly drawn, and if Ringwood go all the way and win, they are promoted to Tier 3. They are now in the Victorian State League in Tier 3. If they go on to win the flag in their Tier 3 State League, They represent Victoria and take part in the National Promotion Knockout Bracket, competing with the winners from the 7 other states and territories leagues. The bracket is then randomly drawn, and if Ringwood go all the way and win, they are promoted to Tier 2, the NAFL. East Ringwood are now in Tier 2 in the NAFL, or National Australian Football League, with 23 other teams. If they make the top 8, go all the way and win it, you guessed it, they are promoted to Tier 1, the AFL. So hopefully that example given gives the tier system a bit of a better understanding for you. After now viewing what the AFL Pyramid would look like, probably a big question still remains. How would the recruitment and the AFL draft now work? Would each tier have their own drafts? Would under 18 competitions such as the NAB League be removed? Would drafts be removed entirely and a transfer market and player values system be in place? Those stated are all feasible ideas. But because recruitment and the AFL draft plays an enormous part on the sport, as well as the popularity, the AFL draft, rookie draft, mid-season and pre-season drafts would still be in place and existence, meaning the top-rated youngsters and mature-age players in the country would be able to play Tier 1 footy. However, this creates a dilemma. Because of the 18th place team in the AFL usually getting the first overall pick, they will not have access to the draft nor the picks since they have been relegated to Tier 2. Because of this, the first overall pick would instead go to the team that has been promoted from Tier 2 into the AFL. It creates sort of a reward for the team being promoted and a punishment for the team being relegated. As discussed earlier in this video, list sizes would need to be reduced to supply numbers to lower tiers and to make the AFL a more exclusive and high quality league. This would mean that the amount of selections in all drafts would be reduced. The reducement of selections creates advantages and disadvantages with a scenario like this. The downside being athletes and players having a harder chance to be drafted, but it does provide a lot of upside in hindsight. Players that are unfortunate to not pick up an AFL contract can be picked up by a side from the NAFL in Tier 2 or even an AFL reserve side and play their profession there. So to recap, the drafts in the AFL we all know today would still be in place, but with fewer selections, and the lower tier sides would have the chance to pick up players unlucky not to be given an AFL contract, as well as the delisted players. And finally, the Tier 2 team that gets promoted gets the Tier 1 relegated side's draft picks. The transition from the league we know now to a fully functioning football tiered system seems like a grueling and near impossible task. The amount of money needed, as well as the small and large things needed to be changed or discussed that wasn't stated in this video. Player top-ups, broadcast deals for lower leagues, changing of players' salaries, memberships, would there be a national cup, the soft cap, stadiums, financial scenarios for almost everything new, the list goes on. It's a very overwhelming topic to think about all the variables. Let's not forget one of the main ones, the fans and the community. AFL has such a rich and heavy cultured history, so many supporters would certainly be opposed to the idea of this happening. Too many might see it as an unnecessary addition to a sport we adore, or a fan's favourite team being relegated out of the AFL. There are obviously many red flags from AFL fans' perspectives, as they are, and I am, the people that keep the sport alive with its support. So most likely, there would be protests to those against. But maybe, if a transition like this were to happen, it would create a whole new exciting chapter in the Australian rules football book. New teams, new fans, more players from overseas, the AFL becoming a harder league to play in, meaning a more entertaining and high quality sport, more popularity. It's a topic that really makes you think on all the what ifs and variables. Will there ever be something like this for the AFL? Nearly 100% no would have to be the answer. As stated many times, the lack of money, people, worldwide popularity, and financial scenarios would make the transition next to near impossible. But this video today showed what the sport would look like as a whole and what would need to be changed if ever the AFL were to introduce a promotion and relegation system.